This is a 360 camera, and it's really awesome because you can take video all the way around the camera in every direction at the same time. And because you're getting video all the way around, you can choose after you shoot the video what you want people to see. You can do cool things like this. I've got the camera mounted on the ceiling, which means I can reach underneath it and we can make the camera see my hands, or the camera can just follow me all the way around the table. And I'm moving, but the camera is actually still in the exact same spot. And like any little action cam, there are all sorts of attachments so that you can attach the camera to pretty much anything. But you know me, I want a specific solution for use right here in the shop. Let me show you what I'm talking about. All of my cameras have this little plate on the bottom. That way they snap into receivers and I can put them on any of my gear. And I've got one of those receivers mounted on the ceiling right above my workbench. And it's awesome for that one spot. Luckily, the ceiling in here is exposed joists. So I've got tons of places to actually hang cameras, but I just need a mount that I can move from place to place. And that's what we're gonna make. But before we get started, just a couple of caveats. One, yes, I'm sure you could probably buy something that would do exactly this and it would be the perfect solution. I'm not gonna do that. Two, this is actually the easiest possible way to do it. Watch. So it does kind of work, and you can actually angle it, which might be useful. I don't know. It works, but it's not gonna work in every situation for me. For one, you actually have to squeeze the clamp, which means you have to have your hand up at the connection point on the joist. And for me, that's like at the top of my reach, on my tiptoes. Plus, that's not gonna work over my workbench. I would have to climb up on top of it and hook it to the place on the ceiling where I wanna be. And I'm not so old that that's a big deal, but it is kind of a pain in the butt. Okay, so what am I trying to solve here? I want to be able to hold the camera and have a clamp or something on the end of it and be able to just stick it up on the ceiling wherever I am around a joist. And maybe that means I have to be able to twist it to lock it in place, or I have some sort of a button that I have to push or something. I don't know yet. I haven't figured that out, but I want to be able to hold the camera, stick it to the ceiling, and start shooting. So I've got a few ideas here, and really the thing that is making all of them a little bit unreasonable, a little bit difficult, is me not wanting to deal with clasping anything up at the ceiling. That would simplify stuff a lot. But because of that, it's actually forced me to think about two things that I normally don't. So one, I'm thinking about what I actually have to be able to do at the ceiling. I need to be able to compress and release. I need to be able to grab and let go of the joists. And the other thing I'm thinking about is what forces do I have available to me at this end of the pole? If everything's happening up top, from down here, what can I do? I can push and pull the whole thing. I can kind of bend and hook the whole thing, and I can twist, but I can only twist in one direction because this is threaded. And if I turn the other way, I'll unscrew the camera. So one idea was having these little fingers that kind of go up around the joist and then they twist. You would twist the camera and they would twist them and they would get closer together. But for that to work, you have to have a ratchet thing in there to hold them in place, and then you have to release the ratchet. It just turned out to be way too complicated. The other thing was using the kind of bending motion and a cam. And this one might almost work. Imagine you had something that the joist would kind of go up around and there was an empty space over here. Then you had a cam and you could twist the arm and it would roll that cam in and clamp around the joist. But I think one of the simplest ideas is to use push and pull and a little spring tension. Imagine you have something that has tension on it trying to squeeze, and you can spread it around the joist. It's gonna hold in place until you pull it down and it'll let go. Luckily, the camera weighs basically nothing, so we're not dealing with a lot of weight. This is the simplest solution, so let's mock it up. All right, prototype number one actually taught me quite a few things that I was not expecting. The first of which is that the spring tension is gonna have to be a lot more than what I was expecting. I need these things to be able to really hold together. Obviously, rubber bands are not gonna be the best solution for that, but it's a good way to prototype. But that spring is not gonna stop this from happening. I figured out that these need to be able to move left and right in both directions, but there needs to be something in the middle to stop them from going too far so that this can never happen. But luckily, that thing in the middle, that stop, can serve another purpose as well up here. This up here is gonna be completely useless if it can't be forced around something. So this opening is gonna have to be at least a minimum distance, but even then, having a square top is not gonna work. What I probably need is a wedge-shaped top so that something can be forced down into it and it gets tighter as it goes down. But also, these things probably need to pivot like the ends of clamps normally do. Like for example, this clamp right here, this end piece right here actually rotates. And on this one, it's because the handle rotates and they need to be separate. But in my case, if I had two of these, as I push a piece in, it's gonna be able to flatten itself out and grab on both sides of the joist. So I'm gonna steal this idea. Now, of course, there's all sorts of other little problems with this because I did it all by hand. I just drew it, I cut it out without even matching the pieces. And so the screws aren't in the right places. The holes are not even in the same places. And it just causes the whole thing to kind of not work. But we'll solve all those little things as we go along. First, let's try to add this spacer and see if that makes a pretty big change. So, prototype number 2, I added the little spacer here to create a gap up top, and I also added a little bit of a taper up there so that a piece could slide in easier. Now this definitely helps, but it also causes a little problem. The joist can slide in, but now there's less surface area touching the joist, which means that it's looser, and I even added more rubber bands. So having that rotating piece up here, theoretically, will give me more surface area, but also just adding a bigger spring is gonna help a lot. Another thing I have not mentioned yet is that I have to be able to attach this camera mount, and it's got a 1/4-20 threaded slot on the bottom of it, and that's gonna attach here, which means I need to be able to have a 1/4-20 bolt extend from this. So whatever I end up doing down here, I've gotta have access to be able to add a bolt from the top, stick out the bottom, so I can attach the camera. So I've got a prototype, and it's actually kind of close. I mean, adding a stronger spring and a bolt out of the bottom of it, it might be usable as it is. But man, it's ugly. So, you know, I could go back and improve it. I could remake every one of these pieces, actually measure, take my time cutting things out, and make it better for me. But then nobody else could use it. I do this thing where I look at a problem and I'm like, well, I'm probably the only person who would ever have this situation and need this thing, but that's almost never true. There is almost always somebody in a close enough situation to yours where your problem solving can be useful to them. And so I can make another one of these for myself, or I could make it with other people in mind. I could build a 3D model of the thing that I want it to be, improve it along the way, make it easier to make for myself, and make it useful for somebody else. Now I say this all the time, but I really think being able to 3D model your ideas and turn your prototypes into a digital model, it's like a superpower. It's an awesome way to be able to problem solve and share things with other people. It's fantastic, and that's why we made the online course Fusion for Makers. Now, I'm not gonna give you a discount code for it right now. The reason I'm telling you about the course is because in the US, Thanksgiving is coming up really soon, which means Black Friday is coming up really soon. And that is when we always have the biggest deal of the year on all of our courses, all of our merch, like this new t-shirt, and all of the other digital plans and everything that we sell. Those discounts aren't available yet, but they will be. And if you don't want to miss them, be sure to jump in the newsletter. Link will be down below, or just go over and follow me on Instagram and we'll post everything over there. Okay, I'm gonna go model this thing and make it better. Version 1 is close, but it's not quite right. For one, I made the hole for the bolt way too big. I don't know what I was doing. But the bigger problem is these little things right here. I ended up printing these pieces out of a flexible material because I figured that'll let them move a little bit more, let them grip a little bit more, and I don't know if it's actually necessary, but the bigger problem is the fact that they can move too far. When they are all the way out like that, I think the angle is too much to be able to grab around a joist. Like imagine this is the joist, and you go like that, it's not gonna work. They should have a different stop on them so that they can't go too far, maybe something like that, and that way, when the joist tries to get inside, it's gonna be able to force them apart, and then they can still flatten themselves out. So version 2 is actually pretty simple. One, just change this number so that hole is a little bit smaller. But then on these pieces, I need to get rid of some of that negative space so it doesn't have enough room to be able to go back so far. I'm just gonna pick an area that's like that or so, update the model, and reprint these two.
This video is sponsored by Element, which is this little packet. It's a mix-in that I'm gonna put in my water bottle after this run to help replenish all the electrolytes that I'm losing. It's super salty, and this one is raspberry flavor. It's my favorite. They've got watermelon, citrus, chocolate, mango chili, lots of different flavors. They all taste great, but they don't have any sugar, no weird chemicals, just a bunch of salt. If you wanna try them out, you can hit my link down below, go order anything, and they're gonna send you a variety pack with all the flavors to try. It's a pretty good deal. And if you don't like it for any reason, get your money back, no questions asked. It's good stuff, it's good for you, I recommend it. Go check them out, hit the link down below. Big thanks to Element for sponsoring the video.
Surprisingly, or not surprisingly, I had to change a lot more things than I thought to make that work. In fact, I've changed and reprinted these pieces, and this piece, multiple times, but I think I've got a good combination here, so now it's time to move on to the spring. I went to the store and I bought a handful of springs, so we're gonna try these out and figure out which one is close enough to work with. All right, that one's obviously too long. This one's too short, probably. Maybe? Actually, that one might be nice and tight, so that's an option. This one is probably too long. This one's definitely too long. This one, it's pretty tough to spring, so we're gonna try these. Now, I didn't really know how I was gonna attach the springs. I still don't, but I went ahead and put in some 1/4" holes in these pieces because I knew that I had 1/4" steel rod. So I'm gonna go cut down a couple pieces, heat them up, and stick them in there, and then figure out how to get the springs on. Okay, moment of truth number 1. Let's see if it can just, well, one, if it can even go around this thing on its own. Not bad. Now, let's see if it stays there tight enough to pick it up. Oh, that's good. Okay. This might work. Hopefully, this can attach to this. Ooh. Nice. And then, this should go like that. See if it works. Let's see if I can just push it up. Nice. So having it in one place is fine, but that's not really the point. The point is that I need to be able to move it around to different spots of the shop very quickly. So I can take it down, and then I can push it up onto the ceiling. And then I can take it down. I can put it over the workbench. Or I can put it way over here in a totally different part of the shop. How about that? I made a thing. Now, did I have to make this thing to be able to hang the camera? No. Could I have made it in a whole bunch of different ways that may have been easier, maybe more effective? Probably yes. But in doing this, I actually learned a whole lot about how clamps are made, realizing that the geometry of every single one of these parts has a lot to do with how well the clamp works. And now I've got a thing that I made that I get to use, and that makes me happy. Anyway, hope this gave you some ideas for something that you can make for your shop. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll catch you next time. Almost my entire ceiling in the shop is exposed joists, which means joists, which means they're bleh. But before we get started, just a couple of okay, negative space so it can't fold back, fold. And so now I've got that in my baby, I don't know what I'm saying.